Hey there everybody, it's Mark Crilley. I'm back with another question and answer video. This is number 28 in my ongoing series. If you enjoy it, please check out the link to the playlist. There are 27 other videos that came before it in the series. And today I'm going to begin with a simple question from Per Hendrick L. Do you like Star Wars? And could you please make a Star Wars fan art video? Well, that is indeed what I'm doing today. As you can see, I put down the basic guidelines of Darth Vader, and it has been a while since I did one of these white lines on black paper videos. This is actually the third one that I've done, I believe, and I thought Darth Vader was a very good subject for it because you got that black helmet. If you put it against a black background, it's all those shiny white reflections that help to define the character. So that's what I'm going to be working on as I answer these questions. Let's go ahead and get into the first one. Number one, do you like all your drawings? From Evo Lee. No, I do not like all my drawings. In fact, I would say that that is probably true of almost all artists. You are rarely 100% happy with your art. Every once in a while I'll get something where I feel like, yes, that's exactly what I wanted it to look like, and I'm 100% pleased with this piece. But most of the time, no, it's not as good as I wanted it to be. Sometimes it's really very far from what I wanted it to be. And indeed, I have to sort of start all over again from the beginning when things don't go as well as I would like. But I wanted to sort of emphasize, I don't dwell on that. You know, I think sometimes people get real frustrated. They focus so much on how their drawings are not exactly the way they want them to be. I think maybe with a professional, I don't know, I can't speak of everybody, you reach a point where you sort of are a little more accepting and you say, yeah, well, you know, I hate to put it as you win some, you lose some. But it's kind of like that. And I think if you are, you know, broken up and dejected every time your art is not as good as you want it to be, then it's going to make it hard for you to, you know, do this as a job, right? So I think you have to kind of suck it up a little and say, yeah, well, you know, it's I'm going to have good days and bad days, and when the drawing is not that great, I'm not going to beat myself up over it. I'm going to sort of accept that I am only human and that I make mistakes. So let's move on to the second question from JTrix9. Can someone in high school who is really good at drawing and writing make a comic book that will sell well? This is an interesting question, and one that I see a lot. In fact, I probably saw a number just this last time among all the questions that were placed on the video earlier this week. It is certainly possible. Let me begin by saying that some great authors wrote their books when they were young. I didn't realize this until I looked into it, but Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein at the age of 19. I'm surprised people don't mention that more often. 19-year-old. Really changed the course of literature with that book, right? Frankenstein, hugely important book. She wrote that at the age of 19. More recently, The Outsiders. Have you ever heard of this film directed by Francis Ford Coppola, based on a book written by S.E. Hinton, apparently in high school, while she was still in high school. She wrote that book. There's numerous, and maybe the most recent one that I can remember is Aragon. Does anyone remember that one? Christopher Paolini, hope I'm saying that right. 19 years old, again, when he wrote that book, had it published, and it became quite a sensation, first of a trilogy of books. So that, within the world of literature, yes. Now, within comics, it's a little harder for me to think of an example. I know that Jeff Smith invented bone when he was very young. Like at the age of 9, Jeff Smith started creating bone comics and really worked out everything, including the logo and stuff. It's amazing, and he held on to all this. So that's not the published version that came years later when he was older. And so it's a little different from what the question was. Can you, while still in high school, be a published comic book creator? I would say it can be done, and if you're open to the idea of self-publishing, then yeah, that's absolutely possible. Now, getting the attention of a publisher like Marvel or DC when you're in high school, I think you would have to be a phenomenal artist and writer, almost like a prodigy, I'd say, to get the attention of those companies at that age. That being said, one other great example is Todd McFarlane created Spawn when he was 16. Again, not published at the age of 16, but he invented Spawn at the age of 16. And of course, Spawn went on to become one of the biggest comics of the 90s and indeed has its place in comic history. But he's sort of more like me. He didn't actually begin doing the comics professionally until he was 24. In my case, it was even later. I was 29, I think, when I finally got published. So anyway, a lot of info there. Kind of a big info dump in my answer to that question, but hopefully it's encouraging to you. Those of you who would like to get published young, there are plenty of precedents for that. And at the very least, start making your creation young, because you never know how far that will take you, like it did with Jeff Smith and Todd McFarlane. Let's move on to number 3 here by Drakes and Dragons. If Mickey Falls or Brodys Ghost were developed into live action, would you prefer a television show or a series of movies? And why or why not? Now, this relates a little bit to a video that I did not so long ago where I was talking about the content dictates form. The form or the content of my comics, Mickey Falls and Brodys Ghost, to me, they are clearly movie ideas, which is to say they have a beginning, a middle, and an end. The middle is quite long and builds towards a climactic sequence, and more or less everything is resolved after that, and it winds down and it's over. That, to me, it sounds kind of obvious to say, but that's sort of a movie structure. The other way of doing things is to make something more episodic, little episodes, fun little things that happen with these characters again and again and again. That becomes more of like a TV type of thing. Now, both Mickey Falls and Brodys Ghost, I'd say, are more movie type stories. But my earlier comic book series, which I have been showing a little bit lately, Akiko, that comic book series, I would say, was more of kind of like a TV series. I mean, the first story was about them going on this big, long journey, and they kept having little mini adventures along the way. And so I would say that one definitely lent itself a little bit to a TV show. It could have been a TV cartoon. In fact, there was interest in that at one point. Sadly, it didn't go much beyond that. So yeah, I think for Mickey Falls and Brodys Ghost, I see them as movies, and wouldn't it be awesome if it were to happen? I think it's still possible, especially with Brodys Ghost, because there is coming out soon, May 10th, next month, the Brodys Ghost Collected Edition, all 6 of those books brought together into a single volume. I guess I'll put the link if anyone wants to pre-order it. But that, I think, allows the whole story to be sort of dropped down on somebody's desk in Hollywood, hopefully. A guy can dream, can't he? And who knows, maybe they will see and feel as I do, hey, this is kind of like a movie. So, yeah, thanks for that question. Drakes and Dragons. Let's move on now to number 4. From Mr. Person. I like that name, Mr. Person. If you could only draw one subject for the rest of your life, what would it be? Ooh, that's kind of a tough one, I'm like the man of a million interests when it comes to art, constantly changing styles, constantly doing different types of drawings. And so that almost sounds like a little bit of a nightmare scenario to me, being locked into one thing. I'll tell you, I do have a sort of a dream, and maybe I'm kind of kidding myself, but I'm not the kind of person who thinks of retiring necessarily. I probably will continue creating stuff as long as I've got breath inside me. But I sort of like the idea of returning to oil painting. Some years from now, when I maybe don't need to keep up the schedule that I'm keeping up right now. And I could see myself doing a lot of sort of impressionist landscapes. And I suppose to answer that question, if I could only do one subject for the rest of my life, I might sort of take on the challenge. Can I, even at this late stage in life, become skillful at impressionist landscapes? kind of weird for that to be the answer to this question, seeing as I am known now for comics and manga-style illustrations and so forth. Who knows? Maybe that's the subject for an upcoming video. Impressionist watercolor or something. I don't think I could do oil painting in one of these videos. You know, I need to sharpen this pencil. Hang on just a second. Okay, so I decided at the same time to get a little more work done so as to get myself a little closer to the finished illustration. Definitely need to have this thing finished before the video ends. That is a new rule of my video. So let's move on now to number 5 from Exodus 2017. Do you feel that anime/manga as a whole is too sexual? I don't, but others, more specifically older people, believe so. Interesting question relating to the sort of image of manga and anime, especially in the United States. I do think that owing to the type of material that is reproduced in America and shown a lot on the internet, it has sort of acquired a reputation, some of it, and especially for people who don't look into it very closely. It sadly has developed a reputation for being sort of sex-obsessed, and indeed some of it is, you know, entirely inappropriate for younger readers. Let's be honest about that. But I want to point out that what you see when you go to, say, a Barnes & Noble in America, when you go into the manga section, you are seeing really a quite small fraction of what is being published in Japan, what makes it over to America. My wife, who is Japanese, has pointed this out to me, that, you know, it's only this certain type of teenage-oriented manga that is seen in America, and so the concept of what manga is greatly reduced here to one particular subcategory. And I've seen this myself in Japan. They've got manga on anything, things you can't even imagine succeeding in America. Like I saw one on fishing. I saw a manga that was, you know, it involved a character who goes fishing, and you follow him in his fishing pursuits, clearly aimed at fishing enthusiasts, maybe provides even tips and so forth to help you when you're fishing. First of all, a comic like that would never, I don't want to say never, but in older times anyway, never get published in America. You know, comics just were not open to such a wide variety. I think that's changing a little bit, but it is kind of remarkable that that type of thing, you know, cooking, they would have, my wife was reading one on that had a nurse. It was just about the nursing profession in a way. These manga don't even get translated and printed up in America, it seems to me. Or, you know, I don't want to make sweeping generalizations like that, but I think if you look at the ones that become popular, like Naruto or Bleach, Full Metal Alchemist, they do seem to be, they tend to lean towards a certain type of teenaged audience or college-aged audience type of book. And indeed, within that range, sadly, there are a lot that are this kind of mature reader, sexually oriented stories, or stories that at least contain that kind of content. And that has resulted in a reputation arguably unfair for the entirety of the manga world. And so I guess I would just say, yes, I think that it is viewed as overly sexual. I think that view is inaccurate, but I would say kind of understandable in some situations, based on the limited contact that people have with manga and what they tend to see. But on the whole, I would say it is unfortunate that people have that impression, and certainly inaccurate, wildly inaccurate when you consider the entirety of what's published in Japan. Okay, number 6, I got to break out my French accent for this one. From Jeff M.C. Jefferson. Si tu devais choisir un autre métier, pas artistique, ce serait lequel? Going back to my high school French there, the translation, if you had to choose another profession, not art, what would it be? Love that question, and I'm just going to say not writing as well, because it seems to me the spirit of the question is to force me to break out of what it is that I do for a living now and sort of imagine doing something else for a living. I guess the first thing that comes to mind is public speaking, although, again, that maybe is going against the spirit of the question, because I do a certain amount of public speaking, not as much as I used to. But public speaking is so much fun. You get to travel, you get to meet people face to face, and hopefully inspire some young readers and so forth, and pass on whatever advice I can to them. So that would be one thing. You know, it's funny, I sort of look back on things that I did when I was younger. I was a house painter for one summer with a friend, and I got happy memories of that, I gotta tell you, you know? You could listen to the radio, you don't have to be so focused with your brain all the time. You're getting this job done, you feel good about what you're doing. But I don't know, I probably have a romanticized memory of what that was like to do it just for a summer. If I did it every day, I might find that it's a lot harder than I imagined it to be. So let's move on now to the next question. But thank you, Jeff, for that question in French. I love to get multilingual here on the channel. Number 7 from Battling Beasts. Having worked on both comics and chapter books, which would you say is easier / faster to do? Let me actually go grab one of my chapter books, because maybe some of you have never even seen them. All right, well, once again, took advantage of that break to get just a bit more work done on the drawing, but I did want to show one of my old chapter books, Akiko Pieces of Gax, published by Random House Children's Books back around the year 2000 or so. I had 10 different books in this series. Here's a sample illustration of Spuckler, seen from camera position inside the mouth of this monster that he's about to get eaten by. Spoiler alert. But as you can see, it is indeed prose fiction. You know, I would say 95% words. Hey, that looks a little bit like, what's her name from the Star Wars movie? Maybe that's where they got the idea. I'm forgetting. Kanata? Is that her name? Maz Kanata? Something like that. Isn't that funny? I did not plan to show that, but it popped up. Anyway, it is almost entirely just words, and that meant, of course, sitting down with a laptop and writing, rather than drawing for, you know, weeks at a time to get these manuscripts done. But the question really was, which between the chapter books and the comics is easier, faster to do? Well, no question, comics are much more time-consuming, take a long time to create comic book pages. Someone else had asked, in fact, I was considering making it a question in this video, how many pages can you do in a day? I think for me, 1 page per day would be the best I could do in terms of, in the style that I work. If I had a more cartoony or simpler style, I might be able to do 2. Hard for me to picture. We're talking about from nothing, right? From a blank page to a rough draft to a finished page. Hard for me to picture, even in a cartoony style, doing any more than 2 pages in 1 day. I just, and I do hear, you know, seriously, I hear from comic book creators. Jeff Smith, I believe, is one of them, who has had, you know, this sort of carpal tunnel syndrome because of having to push himself to meet deadlines and so forth. It can literally be dangerous to try to produce too many pages in 1 day. So anyway, no question, comics is more time-consuming. That being said, I don't think I would be happy doing just chapter books if I had to, instead of comics. I'm glad that I had the opportunity to do that, but it was very hard for me to describe scenes with words rather than drawing them. I think I'm a decent writer. I'm certainly not a great writer. So I suppose I came up against my own limitations with those books in terms of, how well can I put across a story in words alone. I felt really that I was kind of fighting with one hand tied behind my back, deprived of the ability to draw whole sequences, having to describe them only in words. I just felt like I wasn't firing on all cylinders. I wasn't using my entire bag of tricks, whatever metaphor, what other metaphor can I use to describe this? Cylinders, bags of tricks. Anyway, looking back, I appreciate having had that opportunity. I don't see myself doing more chapter books, but you never know. That opportunity may come along, and I'm not saying I would turn it down. Let's move on now to number 8. From J.N. Battle. What is the correct number of pages or minimum page in a comic book volume or a graphic novel? The answer to this question really comes down to the form that you want your book to be published in. And I always say, and it may sound a little ridiculous, but go get one of these books. Count for yourself. In say a manga, count how many pages there are in one of these Naruto books. I believe there are more than 200 or so. Here's the thing about publishing and the printing process. It's usually going to be the entire book, the number of pages in the entire book, is going to be based on 8, because they are printed in sheets of paper that get cut into 8 pages. So you always go up in 8s before you get to your final page count. Now, this does not include the front part of the book and the back part of the book and different things like that. So it's you're counting the entire number of pages. Then you may have to count again just the number of pages that are for art. But the simple answer is there is no one established number. Different books are being published these days at different lengths. When I did comics back in the 90s, they were 24 pages long. And that was my format. So I always had to create 24 pages. Inside each book. But I don't know what it's like these days. I know that they had, 32, right? That's all based on 8s. You could go up to 32 pages. You could go up to 40 pages. So the simple answer, I would say, is to go and count the number of pages, believe it or not, for the type of thing that you would like to do. And the fact is, almost any number of pages that you come up with, if your story is good enough, they'll find a way of fitting it into book form. But in a way, the more the better. If you only have 12 pages, that's not going to be regarded as a finished story. It's not long enough, right? So that's like a short story. So anyway, Miki Falls was about 160, I think, pages each one, which was a lot, let me tell you. That was a lot of work to get those done. Let's move on now to number 9. From Just Another Ratata. Have you ever had bad art advice? If so, what was it? Interesting question. I don't know if I've ever had art advice that I would call bad. I think the type of art advice that I disagree with pretty strongly is art advice that's based on sweeping generalizations and a kind of a one-size-fits-all approach where they say, this is the way, right? You hear me saying, I'm not saying this is the way, because I disagree with that. There is no one way to create art. I disagree with anyone who says this type of art is automatically superior to this other type. I just don't like that kind of boxed-in approach to talking about art. I think in art we need to embrace the ambiguity, the sort of gray areas, and not try to make everything so cut and dried. Now, I can give an example of advice that I got in the realm of acting. That was the only one that I could think of in terms of, I hesitate to say bad advice, but advice that I disagreed with. And I took an acting class my freshman year of college, and the teacher came out and said, all right, guys, you just have to understand and agree with me right at the beginning of this class that there is one type of good acting, by which he meant naturalistic acting, like Meryl Streep, right, in most of her movies, is doing very convincing naturalistic acting. He said, that's good acting. All the other kinds of acting are bad, exaggerated, over the top, That stuff, that's not good acting. We will not be learning that in this class. I refuse to teach it to you. And then he also said there's one way of getting there, and it's the method acting. That's the only way of getting really good at acting. So he really, I think in a way, he was just kind of trying to shut the door on competing styles of acting so that the class wouldn't become a mess of different styles. And I suppose I can understand that, but part of my spirit just rebelled. What do you mean there's only one kind of good acting? Outrageous! Good day, sir. And I stormed out of the class. No, I didn't, but that always stuck with me as a moment where I was like, you know what? I completely disagree with that. There are so many different types of acting, and I refuse to just put one above them all. So there you go. Great question there about bad art advice. Let me know, guys, if you've had any bad art advice. Maybe we can do a separate video about that. That brings us to number 10 of the serious questions, should we call them? The earnest questions. This one from Myra Howlett. Number 10. Do you think it's better to have a piece with a story but horrible lines, or a piece with no story but it looks like Picasso himself could have drawn it? Now, the word piece here is a little confusing to me. I think what we're talking about, maybe a comic book story or some kind of a thing, and maybe the question comes down to what's more important, story or art? Would you rather have something that has a really good story but the art is terrible, or something where the story is no good but the art is fantastic? If we are in the realm of storytelling, I have to say clearly, I think you're better off with a good story. I can think of examples of good stories that have subpar art, but we still love the story. But if you're doing a book or something and the story's no good, all the beautiful art in the world is not going to save it. So, ironically, here I am doing a channel about, mainly about how to draw, and yet I'm telling you a story and ideas and things that come down more to words than to art. Are maybe of primary importance. Unless, of course, you want to be an illustrator. But even then, an illustrator has to have a sense of story, of narrative, I think. So anyway, that brings us to the end of these questions. What I'm going to do now is grab my beloved white gouache. I'm going to get the water and the brush ready and start adding some highlights, and then we're going to come back for the lightning round questions. And we got some good lightning round questions this time. So hang on, I'll be right back. Okay, well, it's a little hard to do the lightning round while applying white gouache, so I'm going to do just a little bit of real-time application of the white gouache. We'll take a little break from the questions and answers, just so as to show you where we're going with this technique. Those of you who've seen the earlier videos, you will recall that it is mostly done with white pencil on ordinary black paper. People are going to say, where did you get the black paper? And, I just went to one of these craft stores where, where they sell stamps or things for making scrapbooks and things like that. It was not some amazing high-class art store, but they had these pieces of black paper. And I would say basically any, even black construction paper, like the children use, I think would be fine for this technique. In any case, you can see that using this white gouache allows me to get a much sharper, well, first of all, it's whiter, but then the edges of it are sharper than cleaner than what you would get using the white colored pencil. So that's why I sort of combine the two different things, and hopefully you're going to see a difference in the degree to which it really makes the light convincing. These lighting effects that I've been striving for throughout this video, I think will be greatly assisted by the white gouache. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this off in time-lapse, and then we'll be back for our wonderful lightning round questions. All right, well, that's the end of the white gouache segment, and now I'm going to move on to the ever-popular lightning round. Now, the lightning round are the short questions that can be answered quite quickly, and some of them are just a little bit silly. This first one's not silly, though. It comes from Rainbow Overlord. Why do you do your time lapses before you do your real-time drawing lesson, or the narrated version, as I call it? I think of the time lapse as the movie trailer, and the narrated version as the movie. So that's my logic behind that. Ironically, these videos, these question and answers, are the few ones where I do often do a time lapse later on. So keep your eyes open, although if you've watched this version, I don't know if you'll want to watch it in time-lapse, but I will eventually upload a time-lapsed version of this Darth Vader image. Let's move on to the next one. Asterix Fowl. Did you like The Force Awakens? Sam didn't like it very much. Who is Sam? Well, I disagree with him or her, depending on who this Sam is. I liked The Force Awakens. In fact, it's probably my third favorite of all the movies, with the first Star Wars coming in at number 1 and Empire coming in at number 2. I just really enjoyed pretty much every part of it. Loved the humor, loved how they, and the new characters, just great. I was very pleased with it, and it makes me very excited to see what they do in the upcoming films. This one from Sherry Diamonds. How many books have you made? Well, Sherry, you made me count them, and I've come up with 33 and a half. A half? How could I do half a book? Well, I was hired to illustrate a book that I did not write, called The Enormous Egg, so I count that as half a book. And there are more coming. I will be telling you about them, but there will be 3 different books, folks, this year alone, coming out. So rather than go on about them and hype myself right now, I will save that for another video. Let's go on to number 4 from Reeve M. Are you a talking hand? Why, yes, I am. Oh, boy. That's got to be one of the most embarrassing things I've ever done in any one of these videos. This from Gracie Dove. Why did the picture go to jail? Because it was framed. Don't blame me, people. Blame Gracie. Take up your concerns with Gracie. I was forced into that pun. Unwillingly. This one from Lemon Mania 96. The white gouache has kidnapped all of the Prismacolor pencils. What will you, the king of blushies, do to save them? Well, of course, I have to round together my Dixon Ticonderoga posse and go after that nasty white gouache. But I don't think the white gouache is in any condition to kidnap anybody these days. Looking pretty used up, folks. But I keep using it all the way till the end. Let's go now to number 7 by Psy Addict. Have you ever tried a frozen tater tot? I just ate 2 and they're surprisingly good. LOL. No, I've never tried a frozen tater tot. You got me curious. We don't even have any, but maybe I'll buy some. And those of you who have tater tots in the freezer, let me know. Psy Addict here may have given you a time-saving culinary tip. Here we go with Sen, number 8. Has anybody ever told you that you sound similar to Markiplier? Yes, I'm getting that a lot lately, folks, but I do want to point out that I've been on YouTube since 2007. Markiplier joined in 2012, so who sounds like who? That's the question. Plus, I'm older than he is, so I had a voice before he had a voice. Quite literally. Here we go. AOJ Rowe. How many art limitations would you encounter if both your hands were turned into avocados? That is certainly among the oddest questions I've ever encountered. It would be lots of limitations for sure. What would I do with my hands as avocado? You know, I would be tempted to turn one of them into guacamole and the other into a California roll. And then where would I be? Let's finally wind it up with possibly the strangest question that has been in any of these videos. This from Nido Plays. Brub, zubble, nub, gobble, snizzy do? Flop, noggle, drip, zup, zup, go? To which I can only say, ding, dang, diddly, hoodly, boodly, schnucker, doodly, flukely, pluke, plukes. And having said that, I don't see that I can say much of anything else. Let's go ahead and lay down this pencil. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. And I'll be back with another one real soon.